Marcus Wellington stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights flicker below his penthouse. The tech billionaire had built his empire from nothing, but tonight felt like everything was crumbling. His wife Sarah had died in a car accident 6 months ago, leaving him alone with their 8-month-old son Daniel. The grief consumed him daily, and managing his company while caring for a baby seemed impossible. His assistant had recommended several nanny agencies, but finding the right person felt overwhelming. He needed someone trustworthy, experienced, and patient. After weeks of interviews, he had hired 3 different nannies, but none lasted more than 2 weeks. The first complained about the baby's crying. The second seemed more interested in his wealth than childcare, and the third quit without explanation. Daniel's cries echoed from the nursery, pulling Marcus from his thoughts. He rushed upstairs, finding his son red-faced and inconsolable in his crib. Marcus picked him up, trying everything he could think of, rocking, singing, checking his diaper, offering a bottle. Nothing worked. The exhaustion was taking its toll on both of them. The next morning, Marcus called the agency again, desperate for help. They sent over a young African-American woman named Keisha Robinson. She arrived at his doorstep with a warm smile and gentle eyes, carrying credentials from one of the city's most prestigious childcare programs. At 26, she had 5 years of experience working with infants and came highly recommended. During the interview, Keisha spoke softly about her passion for childcare and her understanding of infant development. She noticed Daniel fussing in his playpen and asked permission to comfort him. Within minutes, she had the baby calm and giggling. Marcus was impressed but remained cautious. He had been disappointed before. Keisha started the following Monday. Marcus explained his demanding schedule and the importance of maintaining routines. He worked mostly from his home office but traveled frequently for business meetings. The arrangement seemed perfect initially. Keisha arrived punctually each morning, took excellent care of Daniel, and even helped organize the nursery more efficiently. For the first week, everything appeared normal. Marcus would check on them periodically between conference calls, always finding Daniel content and well cared for. Keisha seemed professional, keeping detailed notes about feeding times, nap schedules, and developmental milestones. She communicated clearly about Daniel's needs and never overstepped boundaries. However, Marcus began noticing small things that seemed odd. Sometimes when he entered the nursery unexpectedly, Keisha would quickly move away from Daniel or seem startled. She often had small containers of what she claimed were homemade baby food, even though Marcus provided expensive organic options. When he asked about her preparations, she gave vague answers about special recipes her grandmother had taught her. The baby's behavior started changing subtly. Daniel, who had been a fussy eater, suddenly seemed more content during feeding times when Keisha was around. His sleep patterns improved dramatically and he appeared calmer overall. Marcus initially attributed this to Keisha's expertise, but something felt different, almost too good to be true. One afternoon, Marcus finished his meetings earlier than expected. Instead of announcing his presence, he quietly walked toward the nursery, hearing Keisha's voice speaking softly to Daniel. As he approached the partially open door, he could hear her saying something about making everything better and helping you grow strong. The tone seemed more intimate than professional, which made him uncomfortable. When he entered the room, Keisha was feeding Daniel from one of her homemade containers. She smiled and explained that she was introducing new flavors to expand his palate. Marcus nodded but felt an inexplicable unease. Something about the situation didn't sit right with him, though he couldn't pinpoint exactly what was wrong. That evening, after Keisha left, Marcus found himself questioning his instincts. Was he being paranoid because of his grief and stress? Or was there something genuinely concerning about his nanny's behavior? He decided to pay closer attention over the next few days, hoping to either confirm his suspicions or put his mind at ease. The uncertainty gnawed at him as he watched Daniel sleep peacefully in his crib. His son seemed healthier and happier than he had been in months, but Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was happening right under his nose. He resolved to discover the truth, whatever it might be. Marcus spent the next few days observing Keisha more carefully. He noticed she always brought a small insulated bag containing various containers of what appeared to be baby food. When he asked to see the ingredients, she would smile and mention they were organic vegetables and fruits, perfectly safe for infants. Her explanation sounded reasonable, but something in her eyes suggested she was holding back information. During lunch on Wednesday, Marcus decided to work from the living room instead of his office, giving him a better view of the nursery area. He watched as Keisha prepared Daniel's afternoon feeding with meticulous care, warming one of her containers and testing the temperature multiple times. Her attention to detail was impressive, but her secretive behavior around the food preparations continued to bother him. Daniel's transformation had been remarkable. The baby who once cried for hours now seemed content and alert. His appetite had improved dramatically, and he was gaining weight at a healthy rate. Marcus should have been relieved, but instead he felt increasingly suspicious. No nanny had ever achieved such dramatic results so quickly. Thursday morning brought an unexpected opportunity for answers. Marcus received an urgent call requiring him to attend a 2-hour meeting across town. He informed Keisha about the change in plans and left quickly, but instead of going to his meeting, he parked around the corner and waited. After 20 minutes, he quietly returned to his apartment using the service elevator. The penthouse was unusually quiet as Marcus crept toward the nursery. He could hear Keisha talking to Daniel in hushed tones, her voice filled with an emotion that seemed deeper than professional care. As he listened more closely, he began to understand fragments of what she was saying. Words about special nutrition and helping you thrive like your mama would want. Peering through the crack in the door, Marcus saw Keisha sitting cross-legged on the floor with Daniel in her lap. She was feeding him from a small spoon, but the substance didn't look like typical baby food. It appeared more liquid, almost like a smooth soup or puree with an unusual greenish tint. Daniel was eating eagerly, reaching for the spoon and making happy sounds. What shocked Marcus most was the tender way Keisha was interacting with his son. She was singing a soft lullaby he didn't recognize, probably something from her own childhood. Her movements were gentle and maternal, as if Daniel were her own child. The scene was touching but also deeply unsettling given his growing concerns about her feeding practices. After Daniel finished eating, Keisha carefully cleaned the container and spoon, placing them back in her insulated bag. She then held the baby close, rocking him gently while continuing to hum. Marcus watched as Daniel's eyelids grew heavy, and within minutes he was fast asleep in her arms. The entire routine seemed practiced and intimate. Marcus quietly retreated to his office, his mind racing with questions. What exactly was Keisha feeding his son? Why was she being so secretive about it? And why did Daniel respond so positively to whatever she was giving him? He needed answers but wasn't sure how to approach the situation without seeming accusatory or paranoid. That afternoon, when Keisha was preparing to leave, Marcus casually asked about her background and training. She mentioned growing up in a close-knit family where traditional remedies and homemade foods were common. Her grandmother had been a midwife who believed strongly in natural nutrition for babies. Keisha explained that she often incorporated these family traditions into her childcare approach, always ensuring everything was safe and beneficial. Her explanation sounded plausible, but Marcus remained unconvinced. He decided to conduct some research on his own, looking up information about traditional baby foods and natural remedies. What he found was a mix of legitimate nutritional advice and concerning warnings about untested substances being given to infants. The more he researched, the more worried he became. Some traditional remedies, while well-intentioned, could be harmful to babies if not properly prepared or if they contained ingredients unsuitable for infant digestion. Marcus realized he needed to take action soon, but he wanted more concrete evidence before confronting Keisha. Friday evening, after Keisha had gone home, Marcus searched the kitchen and nursery areas thoroughly. He found no trace of her homemade containers or any ingredients that might explain the mysterious green substance he had witnessed. Everything appeared normal, which only increased his suspicion that she was deliberately hiding something significant. Sleep came difficult that night as Marcus wrestled with his dilemma. Should he confront Keisha directly and risk losing a nanny who genuinely seemed to care for Daniel? Or should he continue investigating until he had definitive proof of wrongdoing? The uncertainty was eating away at him, but he knew he had to protect his son above all else. By morning, Marcus had made his decision. He would set up a hidden camera in the nursery to document exactly what was happening during feeding times. If Keisha was doing something harmful, he needed evidence. If she was simply using harmless family remedies, he could address his concerns openly and honestly. Either way, the truth would finally come to light. Marcus spent Saturday morning installing a small, discreet camera behind a stuffed animal on the nursery shelf. The device was virtually undetectable and would record everything happening in the room. He felt guilty about spying on Keisha, but his parental instincts demanded he ensure Daniel's safety. The camera would either confirm his worst fears or prove that his grief-stricken mind was creating problems where none existed. Monday morning arrived with unusual tension. Marcus tried to act normally as Keisha began her routine with Daniel. He retreated to his office but found it impossible to concentrate on work. Every few minutes he checked his phone to see the live feed from the nursery camera. For the first hour, everything appeared completely normal: diaper changes, playtime, and regular interactions. Around 10:30, Daniel began showing signs of hunger. Marcus watched intently as Keisha retrieved her insulated bag and removed one of her mysterious containers. This time, the camera angle gave him a clear view of the substance inside. It was definitely not typical baby food. The consistency was thicker than puree but thinner than solid food, with small dark specks throughout the greenish mixture. What happened next made Marcus lean forward in his chair, straining to see every detail. Keisha began speaking to Daniel in a language Marcus didn't recognize, not English, but something that sounded African or Caribbean. Her tone was reverent, almost prayer-like, as she stirred the mixture with a small wooden spoon. She appeared to be performing some kind of blessing or ritual over the food before feeding it to Daniel. The baby responded immediately when the spoon approached his mouth, opening eagerly and consuming the entire portion without fussing. Whatever the substance was, Daniel clearly enjoyed it and seemed to crave it. After finishing, he appeared more alert and content than Marcus had ever seen him, reaching playfully for Keisha's face and babbling happily. Marcus saved the video footage and spent the afternoon researching the phrases he thought he heard Keisha speaking. His online searches led him to information about traditional West African feeding practices and herbal remedies for infants. Some articles mentioned special preparations made from indigenous plants and roots, believed to promote health and development in babies. The research revealed both positive and concerning information. While many traditional remedies had been used safely for generations, others contained compounds that could be dangerous for infants, especially if prepared incorrectly or given in wrong dosages. Marcus realized he needed professional help to understand what Keisha was giving his son. Tuesday morning brought another revelation. Marcus watched the camera feed as Keisha prepared what appeared to be a different mixture. This one had a reddish tint and seemed to contain small pieces of what looked like dried herbs or roots. She performed the same ritualistic blessing before feeding it to Daniel, who again consumed it eagerly and showed immediate positive effects. After Keisha left that evening, Marcus collected samples from Daniel's high chair and bib, hoping to have the substance analyzed by a laboratory. He also decided to call his pediatrician, Dr. Sarah Chen, to discuss his concerns. However, he needed to be careful about how he presented the situation. He didn't want to seem paranoid or prejudiced against traditional practices. Wednesday's call with Dr. Chen was enlightening but not entirely reassuring. She explained that while many traditional remedies were harmless and sometimes beneficial, giving unknown substances to infants could be risky. She recommended immediate testing of any samples Marcus had collected and suggested having an honest conversation with Keisha about exactly what she was feeding Daniel. The laboratory results wouldn't be available for several days, leaving Marcus in an uncomfortable position. Daniel continued to thrive under Keisha's care, showing remarkable development and contentment. His weight gain was excellent, his sleep patterns were regular, and his overall demeanor was happier than ever before. If Keisha was doing something wrong, it certainly wasn't harming the baby. Quite the opposite. Thursday brought an unexpected development. While reviewing the camera footage from the previous day, Marcus noticed Keisha making a phone call during Daniel's nap time. She spoke in the same unfamiliar language he had heard during feeding times, and her tone seemed urgent or concerned. She kept glancing toward the sleeping baby while talking, suggesting the conversation was about Daniel. Marcus began to wonder if Keisha was consulting with someone, perhaps an elder in her community or a traditional healer, about Daniel's care. The thought both worried and intrigued him. Was she getting guidance on how to help his son? Or was there something more complex happening that he couldn't understand? Friday afternoon, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of continuing to spy and speculate, he would confront Keisha directly but diplomatically. He planned to express appreciation for Daniel's improvement while asking honest questions about her feeding methods. He hoped this approach would encourage openness without creating defensiveness. As the workday ended and Keisha prepared to leave, Marcus asked if they could have a brief conversation. He saw a flash of concern cross her face, quickly replaced by her usual professional composure. She agreed to stay a few extra minutes to talk, but her body language suggested she knew this conversation might not go as smoothly as their previous interactions. The moment of truth had arrived. Marcus was about to discover whether his suspicions were justified or whether he had been letting grief and stress cloud his judgment. Either way, the secret feeding sessions were about to be exposed, and both he and Keisha would have to deal with the consequences of whatever truth emerged. Marcus gestured for Keisha to sit in the living room while he remained standing, trying to appear non-threatening despite his inner turmoil. He began carefully, acknowledging how much Daniel had improved since her arrival, and expressing genuine gratitude for her dedication. Keisha smiled, but Marcus could see tension in her shoulders as she waited for what was clearly going to be a difficult conversation. Taking a deep breath, Marcus decided on direct honesty. He explained that he had noticed her bringing special food preparations for Daniel and wanted to understand exactly what she was feeding his son. He emphasized that he wasn't angry, just concerned as a protective father who needed to know everything about his baby's care. Keisha's composure cracked slightly, and she looked down at her hands folded in her lap. For a long moment she said nothing, clearly weighing her options. When she finally looked up, her eyes showed a mixture of fear, sadness, and resignation. She asked quietly if Marcus wanted her to resign, which surprised him. He had expected denial or explanation, not immediate surrender. Instead of answering her question, Marcus pressed gently for information about the mysterious substances she had been feeding Daniel. He mentioned the unusual colors and textures he had observed, as well as the ritualistic way she prepared and blessed the food. Keisha's eyes widened with shock. She realized he had been watching her somehow, though she didn't know about the hidden camera. After another long pause, Keisha began to speak in a voice barely above a whisper. She explained that everything started when she noticed Daniel's chronic fussiness and poor eating habits during her first week. The baby reminded her strongly of her younger brother, who had similar issues as an infant 20 years earlier. Her grandmother had successfully treated her brother using traditional remedies passed down through generations. Keisha revealed that she had called her grandmother in Jamaica, describing Daniel's symptoms and asking for guidance. Her grandmother, a respected community healer with 60 years of experience, had recommended specific preparations made from natural ingredients known to calm fussy babies and improve their appetite and digestion. The substances Marcus had observed were carefully prepared mixtures of herbs, roots, and vegetables that had been used safely in Keisha's family for generations. The green mixture contained moringa leaves, known for their nutritional value, combined with pureed sweet potato and a small amount of chamomile for calming effects. The reddish preparation included hibiscus flowers and beetroot, both rich in vitamins and minerals that promote healthy development. Marcus listened intently as Keisha explained that every ingredient had been researched for safety with infants. She had even consulted with a naturopathic doctor in her community who specialized in traditional remedies for children. Everything she gave Daniel was natural, organic, and prepared under strict hygiene standards in her grandmother's kitchen. The blessing ritual Marcus had witnessed wasn't magic or superstition, Keisha explained with growing confidence. It was a cultural practice of expressing gratitude and setting positive intentions for the child's health and well-being. Her family believed that food prepared with love and good intentions was more nourishing than food made carelessly or without thought. As Keisha continued her explanation, Marcus found himself both relieved and frustrated. Relieved that she wasn't giving Daniel anything harmful, but frustrated that she had hidden this from him. He asked why she hadn't been honest about her methods from the beginning, especially given the dramatic improvements in Daniel's condition. Keisha's response was heartbreaking. She explained that in previous positions, when she had mentioned traditional remedies or cultural practices, Employers had reacted with suspicion or outright dismissal. Some had accused her of being unprofessional or dangerous. Despite her excellent results with children, she had learned to keep her methods private to avoid prejudice and misunderstanding. She tearfully admitted that seeing Daniel struggle had reminded her too much of her own brother, who had suffered unnecessarily because conventional approaches weren't helping. Her grandmother's remedies had transformed her brother from a sickly, fussy infant into a healthy, happy child. When she saw similar improvements in Daniel, she felt validated in her approach but terrified of Marcus's potential reaction. Marcus sat down across from Keisha, processing everything she had told him. He could see the genuine care and concern in her eyes, along with the fear that she was about to lose her job for trying to help his son. The situation was far more complex than he had imagined, not malicious deception, but cultural misunderstanding and past experiences with discrimination. The room fell silent as both adults contemplated what would happen next. Marcus realized that his suspicions, while understandable from a protective parent's perspective, had been influenced by unfamiliarity with Keisha's cultural background. At the same time, he understood why she had felt the need to hide her methods, even though the secrecy had created unnecessary anxiety and distrust. Daniel's happy babbling from the nursery monitor broke the tension, reminding both adults that their primary concern should be the baby's well-being. Marcus looked at Keisha and saw not a deceptive employee, but a caring young woman who had used her cultural knowledge to help his son when conventional methods had failed. The conversation had reached a critical turning point. Marcus needed to decide whether to embrace this unexpected revelation about traditional healing practices or maintain his preference for conventional childcare approaches. Whatever he chose would determine not only Keisha's employment, but also the future of Daniel's remarkable improvement and development. The truth was finally out. But the real challenge was just beginning. Learning to bridge the gap between different cultural approaches to childcare and building the trust that had been damaged by secrecy and misunderstanding. Marcus spent several minutes in thoughtful silence, weighing everything Keisha had told him. Looking at her anxious face, he realized this was a defining moment that would either build trust or destroy their working relationship entirely. Finally, he leaned forward and asked if she would be willing to share detailed information about every ingredient and preparation method she had been using with Daniel. Keisha's relief was immediate and visible. She nodded eagerly and began explaining each remedy in detail, including the specific amounts, preparation methods, and intended benefits. She even offered to bring her grandmother's handwritten recipes and the documentation she had gathered about the safety and effectiveness of each ingredient for infant consumption. Marcus requested that they schedule a three-way phone call with Keisha's grandmother so he could ask questions directly and better understand the traditional knowledge behind these remedies. He also wanted to consult with Dr. Chen again, this time with complete information about what Daniel had been consuming. Keisha agreed to both suggestions, grateful for Marcus's willingness to learn rather than simply dismiss her methods. The following day, Marcus spoke with Dr. Chen about the specific ingredients Keisha had revealed. The pediatrician was intrigued rather than alarmed, noting that moringa, hibiscus, and chamomile were all recognized for their nutritional and therapeutic properties. She recommended having the remaining samples tested anyway, just to confirm purity and proper preparation, but expressed optimism about the natural approach. Dr. Chen also mentioned that many of her colleagues were becoming more interested in traditional remedies that had been used safely for generations. She suggested that Keisha's cultural knowledge, combined with proper medical oversight, could be an excellent approach to Daniel's care. This validation from a medical professional helped ease Marcus's remaining concerns significantly. Thursday evening brought the promised phone call with Keisha's grandmother, Mama Rose. The elderly woman spoke with authority and warmth about her 60 years of experience helping families with infant care. She patiently answered all of Marcus's questions, explaining not only what each remedy did, but why traditional knowledge had developed these specific combinations over centuries of use. Mama Rose also shared the heartbreaking story of Keisha's younger brother, who had struggled with severe colic and feeding difficulties as an infant. Conventional treatments had provided little relief, and the family was desperate when they turned to traditional remedies. Within weeks of starting Mama Rose's preparations, the baby transformed into a healthy, content child who went on to become a successful young man. During the conversation, Marcus began to understand the deeper cultural context of Keisha's actions. In her community, sharing traditional knowledge to help children was considered both an honor and a responsibility. Keeping such knowledge secret felt wrong to her, but previous negative experiences with employers had forced her into secrecy. Marcus found himself apologizing to Keisha for his suspicions and for creating an environment where she felt she couldn't be honest about her methods. He acknowledged that his lack of familiarity with traditional healing practices had led to misunderstandings that could have been avoided with better communication from the beginning. Keisha, in turn, apologized for not being transparent about her feeding methods. She admitted that her past experiences had made her overly cautious about sharing cultural practices with employers, but she realized that secrecy had created unnecessary problems. She promised complete honesty going forward and expressed willingness to work with Marcus to create the best possible care plan for Daniel. The laboratory results arrived Friday afternoon, confirming that all the substances Keisha had been feeding Daniel were pure, natural, and free from harmful contaminants. The analysis even revealed impressive nutritional profiles that exceeded many commercial baby foods in terms of vitamins, minerals, and beneficial compounds. Dr. Chen called that evening to discuss the results and recommend a path forward. She suggested continuing Keisha's traditional preparations while maintaining regular pediatric checkups to monitor Daniel's development. She also offered to document the case study, noting that Daniel's remarkable improvement could provide valuable insights for other families dealing with similar feeding challenges. Marcus realized that his initial suspicions had led to an unexpected education about traditional healing practices and cultural diversity in childcare. What had started as a concerning mystery had evolved into an opportunity to provide Daniel with the best of both worlds, loving traditional care combined with modern medical oversight. That weekend, Marcus and Keisha worked together to create a comprehensive care plan that incorporated her grandmother's recipes with detailed documentation and medical consultation. They established protocols for introducing new preparations, monitoring Daniel's responses, and maintaining open communication about any concerns or observations. The transformation in their relationship was remarkable. Where suspicion and secrecy had once existed, now there was mutual respect and collaboration. Marcus found himself genuinely interested in learning about Keisha's cultural background, while she felt valued and respected for her unique knowledge and skills. Sunday evening, as Marcus watched Keisha prepare Daniel's bedtime feeding with her usual ritual of gratitude and blessing, he felt a profound shift in his perspective. The fear and uncertainty that had consumed him for weeks had been replaced by appreciation for the unexpected gift of cultural wisdom that had helped heal his son. Daniel gurgled happily as he consumed his evening meal, completely unaware of the complex emotions and revelations that had surrounded his care. All he knew was that he felt good. His belly was full and the people caring for him were filled with love and positive intentions. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the simplest understanding was the most important one. 3 weeks after their confrontation, Marcus noticed profound changes in both Daniel's development and the overall atmosphere of his home. The baby was not only healthier and happier, but had begun reaching developmental milestones ahead of schedule. He was sitting up independently, babbling more complex sounds, and showing increased curiosity about his environment. Dr. Chen confirmed that Daniel was thriving beyond expectations. The relationship between Marcus and Keisha had evolved into something neither had anticipated. What began as an employer-employee arrangement had transformed into a collaborative partnership focused on Daniel's well-being. Marcus found himself asking Keisha's advice about more than just feeding schedules, valuing her insights about child development and her intuitive understanding of Daniel's needs. Keisha, meanwhile, blossomed under the newfound trust and respect. She began sharing other aspects of her cultural knowledge, including traditional songs, gentle massage techniques, and developmental exercises that had been passed down through her family. Marcus watched with fascination, as these practices seemed to enhance Daniel's growth and happiness in ways he had never imagined possible. One afternoon, Marcus's mother, Eleanor Wellington, made an unexpected visit from her home in Connecticut. The elegant woman had been skeptical of her son's choice to hire such a young nanny, especially one without formal credentials from elite institutions. When she saw Keisha feeding Daniel one of her traditional preparations, her disapproval was immediately apparent. Eleanor's reaction was everything Keisha had feared from previous employers: suspicion, condescension, and barely concealed prejudice. She questioned whether the food was sanitary, suggested that proper baby food from established brands would be more appropriate, and implied that traditional practices were primitive compared to modern scientific approaches to infant nutrition. Marcus found himself in the uncomfortable position of mediating between his mother's concerns and his newfound appreciation for Keisha's methods. He patiently explained Daniel's remarkable improvement, shared the positive laboratory results, and mentioned Dr. Chen's support for their approach. However, Eleanor remained unconvinced and suggested that Marcus was being naive about potential risks. The tension escalated when Eleanor observed Keisha performing her blessing ritual before Daniel's afternoon feeding. She interpreted the cultural practice as some form of witchcraft or superstition, expressing shock that Marcus would allow such behavior around his grandson. Her reaction was so strong that Keisha excused herself to the kitchen, clearly upset by the hostility. That evening, after Eleanor had left for her hotel, Marcus found Keisha in the nursery quietly singing to Daniel as he prepared for sleep. She looked up with tears in her eyes and asked if she should start looking for another position. The encounter with his mother had reminded her of all the times her cultural practices had been misunderstood or dismissed as inferior to mainstream approaches. Marcus sat down beside her and explained that his mother's reaction came from fear and unfamiliarity, not from any real understanding of traditional healing practices. He shared that Eleanor had always been protective and controlling, especially since Sarah's death, and her criticism didn't reflect his own feelings about Keisha's work with Daniel. Their conversation led to a deeper discussion about cultural differences and the challenges of bridging gaps between traditional and modern approaches to childcare. Marcus admitted that his own initial suspicions had been influenced by similar prejudices, and he was still learning to appreciate the value of practices outside his own cultural experience. Keisha opened up about her experiences growing up between two worlds, honoring her grandmother's traditional knowledge while pursuing modern education and professional opportunities. She explained how difficult it was to maintain cultural identity while working in environments that often viewed traditional practices with suspicion or dismissal. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Eleanor returned to the penthouse with a different attitude, having spent the night researching traditional healing practices online. She had discovered articles about the growing scientific interest in traditional remedies and their potential benefits for modern healthcare. Her tone was notably more respectful as she asked Keisha detailed questions about her methods. During their conversation, Keisha patiently explained each preparation and its intended benefits, showing Eleanor the documentation she had gathered about ingredient safety and nutritional value. She also shared photos of her family in Jamaica, including her grandmother, Mama Rose, helping Eleanor see the human faces behind the traditional knowledge. Eleanor's transformation was gradual but genuine. As she observed Daniel's contentment and healthy development, she began to understand that effective childcare could take many forms. She even asked if she could learn some of Keisha's traditional songs and games to use when visiting her grandson. By the end of the week, Eleanor had become an advocate for Keisha's approach, sharing her newfound knowledge with friends and family members who had initially shared her skepticism. She apologized privately to both Marcus and Keisha for her initial reaction, acknowledging that her prejudices had prevented her from seeing the value in traditional practices. The resolution with Eleanor marked a turning point for everyone involved. Marcus realized that their experience could help bridge cultural gaps in childcare and possibly help other families benefit from traditional knowledge. He began researching ways to document and share their success story, thinking it might inspire other parents to be more open to diverse approaches to infant care. Keisha felt validated and empowered in a way she had never experienced in previous positions. For the first time, her cultural knowledge was being celebrated rather than hidden, and she began considering ways to expand her practice to help other families who might benefit from traditional remedies. Daniel continued to thrive, blissfully unaware of the complex cultural negotiations happening around his care. All he knew was that he felt loved, nourished, and content. The adults in his life had learned to work together across cultural differences, creating an environment where traditional wisdom and modern understanding could coexist for his benefit. 6 months later, Daniel's first birthday celebration was unlike anything Marcus had originally envisioned. The penthouse was filled with an unusual mix of guests: tech executives, medical professionals, and members of Keisha's extended family who had flown in from Jamaica for the occasion. Mama Rose, now 92 but still sharp and energetic, had made the journey to meet the baby who had become famous in her community for his remarkable transformation. Dr. Chen attended the party not just as Daniel's pediatrician, but as a colleague working with Marcus and Keisha on a research project documenting traditional feeding practices and their effects on infant development. Several other medical professionals had expressed interest in their case study, recognizing the potential benefits of integrating traditional knowledge with modern pediatric care. Marcus had never imagined that his initial suspicions about his nanny would lead to such profound personal and professional changes. He found himself becoming an advocate for cultural diversity in childcare, speaking at conferences and writing articles about the importance of remaining open to non-traditional approaches that could benefit children's health and development. The success with Daniel had inspired Marcus to establish a foundation dedicated to preserving and studying traditional childcare practices from various cultures. The Wellington Foundation for Cultural Childhood Wellness provided grants for research into traditional remedies, supported practitioners like Keisha in documenting their knowledge, and helped bridge gaps between traditional and modern approaches to pediatric care. Keisha had blossomed into a role she never could have imagined when she first knocked on Marcus's door. While continuing to care for Daniel, she had also begun working with the foundation to develop training programs for other childcare providers interested in incorporating traditional methods into their practice. Her grandmother's recipes had been carefully documented and tested, creating a valuable resource for families dealing with similar feeding challenges. The relationship between Marcus and Keisha had evolved beyond employer and employee into something resembling extended family. Marcus had come to deeply respect Keisha's wisdom and cultural knowledge, while Keisha felt appreciated and valued in ways she had never experienced in previous positions. They worked together seamlessly, combining their different strengths to provide Daniel with exceptional care. Daniel himself had become a healthy, happy, and remarkably advanced toddler. His early struggles with feeding and fussiness were now distant memories, replaced by a child who was curious, active, and socially engaged. His development exceeded all expectations, and he seemed to thrive on the multicultural environment that surrounded him daily. Eleanor had perhaps undergone the most dramatic transformation of all. The woman who had initially viewed traditional practices with suspicion had become one of their strongest advocates. She had even begun learning about other cultural approaches to childcare and health, expanding her worldview in ways that surprised everyone, including herself. At the birthday party, Mama Rose performed a traditional blessing for Daniel's continued health and prosperity. The elderly woman's words, spoken in a mixture of English and patois, brought tears to many eyes as she expressed gratitude for the opportunity to share her knowledge and see it appreciated by people from such different backgrounds. During his speech at the party, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them all together. He admitted that his initial fears and suspicions had nearly caused him to miss out on one of the most valuable experiences of his life, learning to see childcare through different cultural lenses and discovering the profound wisdom that existed in traditional practices. Keisha spoke about the importance of trust and open communication in overcoming cultural barriers. She emphasized that traditional knowledge and modern understanding could work together beautifully when people approached each other with respect and genuine desire to learn rather than fear and prejudice. The evening concluded with Daniel taking his first independent steps, walking directly toward Mama Rose as if he understood the significance of the moment. The room erupted in cheers and applause as the elderly woman scooped up the toddler, tears streaming down her face as she held the child who had brought so many different worlds together. As guests began to leave, Marcus found himself looking around the penthouse that had once felt empty and cold, despite its luxury. Now it was filled with warmth, laughter, and the rich blend of cultures that had become central to their daily life. The space reflected the unexpected family they had created, not bound by blood or traditional relationships, but by mutual respect, shared commitment to Daniel's well-being, and appreciation for the diverse wisdom each person brought to their community. Later that night, as Marcus watched Keisha sing Daniel to sleep with one of Mama Rose's traditional lullabies, he realized that the most shocking thing about catching his nanny feeding his baby hadn't been what she was doing. It was discovering how much richer their lives had become because of it. What had started as a moment of suspicion and fear had transformed into a celebration of cultural diversity, traditional wisdom, and the beautiful things that could happen when people chose understanding over prejudice. The story that had begun with a billionaire's suspicions about his black nanny had evolved into something much more powerful, a testament to the importance of keeping an open mind, the value of traditional knowledge, and the profound connections that could form when people chose to build bridges instead of walls across cultural differences.